What can make you feel better than just about anything else? I'm Dr. Carol, and thank you for joining me on this episode. You know, life can be hard, but there are things that God built into our very being that make us come alive. Generosity is one of those. Today is Giving Tuesday. If you're watching this when it first comes out, the first Tuesday after the American Thanksgiving has been designated worldwide as Giving Tuesday. Now, that doesn't mean that this is the only day to give, but it does remind us that generosity is the way we are created to be. Dr. Carol Ministries is in the middle of something very significant, and I want to invite you to stay tuned at the end of my conversation with John Curtis, my guest today, to find out a bit more. But this conversation with John, it's just going to enlarge your heart. It is Dr. John Curtis. He's been a professor, a organizational development expert, and generosity has been his focus for some years now. He has been a lead consultant with Mission Accelerate, and I am just so thrilled that he is joining me today to talk about the state of our hearts and generosity. Well, John Curtis, thank you so much for being with us. I am looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be asked and I'm looking forward to it as well. So I'm always relish the opportunity to talk about giving and how I can impact our Christian values and help advance those. So thanks again for inviting me on the podcast today.
Something that most, if not all of our listeners will already be aware of, you are hailing from North Carolina, and everybody who knows anything about North Carolina in this 2024 knows Helene went through. And you were just telling me before we clicked record, seeing some of the just devastation and just what happened there in North Carolina just a couple months ago.
It is truly amazing. It's one thing to see the news stories and frankly listen or not to some of the false rumors. We've been on the ground firsthand. We've seen it ourselves, and everywhere there's a little road called Highway 80 near Mount Mitchell, which is the highest mountain east of the Mississippi River. And we went wandering up Highway 80, and like every other church had doors open, free food, pallets full of water bottles, anything we could do to help. I mean, everywhere. FEMA was there, the government was there, lots of volunteers were there. It's just a huge outpouring and an opportunity to see humanity in its best light, if you will, despite the devastation that occurred. So, and people are still, you know, in some cases they'll have years for recovery. But, you know, people have hot food, they have safe places to eat. And I do have to tell a story briefly.
Okay.
One kind of highlight, another member of our team, Reverend Honerkamp, who works on church liaison in Asheville. And I know many folks listening now may recall seeing mainly stories out of Asheville. And that's mainly because the news crews from all over the country were flying into the Asheville airport. It was the only functioning airport. I said, so Nick, tell me how things are going in downtown Asheville. And he said, well, you know, the homeless people have never been happier. They have resources, they have clothes, they've got warm beds, they've got safe places, and the bears. And I said, what? He said, yeah, the city's not able to collect the trash, and so it's overflowing. So the bears are coming out of the mountains. They're not messing with the people because they're happily fed. And he actually sent me a picture that I would show you, this video of about a 300-pound black bear sitting on this woman's front porch in downtown Asheville eating a pumpkin. And so it's one of those things of in the middle of the devastation, God's glory is everywhere, people helping everyone out, and we have happy bears that are well fed as well. So I love telling that little story.
Oh, that makes me chuckle. And thanks for sharing that, John.
Absolutely.
We are airing this, if you're listening when this first comes out, we are airing this on Giving Tuesday. And as you have talked about what you saw in the aftermath of Helene, what you talked about was generosity. Of course, you know, that's what Giving Tuesday is all about. And I know in the aftermath of Helene, many people have heard, and maybe some of our listeners have helped out. But would you just talk about the just the emotion and the spirit that you saw in those people who were giving of themselves, their time, talent, and treasure in that big need?
It was evident. A little town again that's reported on the news called Burnsville, which is north of Asheville. As you go down the main highway, a 4-lane highway, be it the grocery store or the local Save More or the Walmart, parking lots full of people, nobody questioning, nobody doubting, nobody doing anything but embracing what yesterday were total strangers and now was connected, this family and this humanity, if you will, of people helping out, whether you were on the receiving end of the help or on the giving end. The spirit was there and it was evident. Lots of smiles. I know one place in particular, there's a little chain store up here called Save More. And in front of the Save More, they had pallets and pallets of water. Because for the longest time, of course, everybody said, what do we need? We need water. Well, there's plenty of water, but they had bins full of children's toys. And so just as fast as people were pulling up in their vehicles, depositing children's toys into the bins, other parents and children were taking toys out and seeing, a 3-year-old, because they lost everything potentially. Now they have a teddy bear to sleep with tonight. So those kind of touching stories times a million are continuing to occur in the mountains. And it really was a glorious thing to see. We've been back now 3 times and seen that same spirit. The free food, the free generosity, the loving support, and people not questioning what you need help for and being willing to say yes, whatever it may be, whether it's something serious, temporary medical facilities, hospitals brought in mobile units, or whether your child needs a toy, we're here to help you out.
Beautiful, beautiful.
It is.
You mentioned that you saw many churches whose doors were open and the body of Christ being a vehicle for generosity. And I know that is where your heart is, talking to those in the body of Christ about generosity. And that just, I think, is a great segue into some of the theology, if I can say that, some of the foundation about why this matters to God.
Certainly. Well, it's an interesting, and I know there's the reality will begin to settle in, but one of the things that tends to be true on Sunday mornings is we have our own little enclaves based on our denomination. So we have the Baptists over here, and we have the Lutherans over here, and we have the Episcopalians over here. I know in all those giving stories I told you, it was all non-denominational. So, but the connectivity across Christian values, regardless of denomination, again, I think is very evident. And of course, as we all listen to the Word of God, we all know about the importance of giving and helping and loving thy neighbor. And so one of the things I think Giving Tuesday really reinforces, but maybe important to note, because you'll get various explanations or reasons why people want to hesitate or are not sure about moving ahead with philanthropy. We find both with secular health and human service nonprofits and especially Christian ministries say, well, it's COVID. Is now really a good time? Or, well, isn't inflation kind of eating away at people's ability to give? Or, gosh, there's worry about a recession coming. All these different explanations or stories. Well, the reality is in 2023 is the highest level of recorded giving in the history of the United States. And it's gone up every single year, decade after decade. To be a little technical, there's a resource called, and it's really a journal that does the study, but it's the Chronicle of Philanthropy Giving USA report. And last year, they're 1 year behind in their statistics, of course. Generous Americans gave $557 billion philanthropically. Yeah, most ever, crossed the $500 billion mark, if you will, and a $500 billion mark, excuse me. And the first on the list, and you can imagine the various types of nonprofits, top of the list, faith-based organizations. So they're the most generous and also the biggest recipients. So whether it's a ministry in a downtown area dealing with the homeless, or whether it's a Christian college, giving and receiving, but Americans are as generous as ever. And Giving Tuesday does a nice job of kind of reminding everybody about the generosity and the blessings we have here in the U.S., especially when we see stories of catastrophes overseas, war-torn areas. and know that in the United States, even the poorest person is well off, and has resources that 3/4 of the world does not have. And so it's nice to have a single day, but I know and those folks listening to us right now realize, but it's really 365 days out of the year. I think a Giving Tuesday, and a friend of mine says this, and it helps remind us to exercise our giving muscle. And that's
Yes.
your checkbook, or go online, or click that link, or give it away. But the Giving Tuesday is a rallying point, and that sort of day that we celebrate the generosity that America is so well known for. So I'm just excited about being a part of your Giving Tuesday broadcast. But remember, it is Giving January 1st to December 31st that we really want to focus on as well.
Absolutely. And thanks for pointing that out, John. And I didn't ping you to say that, but Giving Tuesday is just a reminder of the lifestyle God invites us to be in. I have been impressed in my own life, and I know you probably have seen this an order of magnitude more than I have, that when I have been generous, it does something to me. Would you talk for a minute about what generosity does for the person who partners with God in doing that?
Yes, absolutely. And I would pause for just a moment, ask anybody listening to reflect back to a time, whether it was last week or last decade, when they gave something away freely, without strings or attachments. Just pause for a moment and kind of reflect on that and see if you can identify in your mind's eye and remember that. The giving versus receiving piece, which is so very, very potent and powerful. If you listen to, and it's easy to see the high profile givers who literally give away billions of dollars. It's the Warren Buffett who started the generosity program of getting billionaires to give away half of their wealth. And of course, for many of us, we go, oh my goodness, they have 50 billion and they gave 25 of it away. But what's the motivation there? They feel good whether they're giving away 25 billion or a child who collects money and has the lemonade stand and ends up getting $7.87 and goes down to the local fire department and turns it in to help firemen who are going out and helping people. So it really runs the gamut. I think net worth wise, age, it doesn't really matter, but it's that whole spirit of why does somebody do that? And I do think as a parent, especially now me as a grandparent, it's that joy of giving and helping children, for the child who's holding on to that Lammy they've had since they were 4 years old, to go then freely give it to another child who doesn't have that. And that's an important lesson that, children learn at our feet. They watch the role models around them. So for parents to help ingrain that, or maybe the folks reflecting back on that moment, I ask everybody to think about and remember the positive feeling, how good that felt to give away, especially when you weren't asking for anything in return. And that kind of goes back, I think, to Helene, because the folks that were there as rescue workers and helping out, and I'm not talking about the paid rescue workers like FEMA, if you will, or even first responders, the folks that were getting paid nothing for, out there giving away tirelessly. And when asking them, and this is that connection, I think, from a humanity point of view, and what Christ would smile about is the idea of, I do it because they're my neighbors. I do it because Jesus says, love thy neighbor. So it gives you a chance when giving to not just talk about being a Christian, okay, not practicing your faith on Sunday morning, but showing up at the local parking lot on Tuesday afternoon and helping out. So there's something in it for us as the giver. But even though we're helping somebody else out through our generosity, our dollars, our gift, our labor, there is something that does come back. And I think that's very rewarding and lasting. That can't be taken away from you, that feeling of generosity. And I can't reinforce that enough. So,
yeah. There's a principle that you at Mission Accelerate, Mission Increase just hammer at over and over again, is that when people are asked to give in the body of Christ, it really isn't out of lack, but out of abundance, that God is generous with us and that there is all that he supplies. And that's the foundation for all of this discussion. Would you talk about that mindset of God's generosity and his abundance that we come to this topic from?
Absolutely. And it's particularly poignant, I think, among Christians and Christian ministries and churches, is that sense of abundance and the belief in God's generosity and that everything belongs to him anyway. And then we do run into situations. This is not uncommon. It's very normal. It's like, well, are you willing to have a fundraiser over here this month and help this other church next month with their fundraising? Oh, I don't know, because there's this scarcity mindset that immediately creeps in that says, well, if those donors give to this other charity, they won't give to us. And so you have to fight against that emotionally and psychologically. The data supports just the opposite. You know, people that have a real appreciation for a Christian homeless shelter, if you will, they believe in that, they value that. And a Christian food bank who's asking for, if you will, donations is not going to steal from. In the body of Christ, there's all that generosity that's there. But the key principle, and I think part of what you're alluding to about our belief and our philosophy, is as an organization trying to fundraise, yes, to acquire new revenue, to expand your mission, it's important. And I find so many, and I'm amazed at times of how many Christian ministries of all sizes think so little of themselves. And I want to give an example, and I don't mean to be critical of anybody listening who might have control over a website, but they'll have the gift size on the online giving button. Click here to donate now, and it'll be $5, $25, $50, or $100, or other. And so one of the things that we do in our fundraising strategy is God is generous, donors are generous, and they do need a little guidance. And I heard a very devout Christian woman in South Carolina many years ago, kind of a curmudgeon, 80-plus-year-old multimillionaire who gave away her wealth on a regular basis and had the room full of, it was like making a pitch for a grant application to a foundation. These are various Christian nonprofits, all hoping to get some of her wealth, frankly. And she was talking about having given $100,000 to the spouse abuse center and $50,000. And this one woman with this little in the back raises her hand and says, "How come you only gave us $2,000 last year?" And she says, "Honey, because that's all you asked me for." You know, so I say to Christian ministries, it doesn't mean it'll happen overnight. For on your website, put $50,000, $25,000, $10,000, $5,000, $1,000, $500, $100, $50, $25. Be bold, be brave, because the donor doesn't know how much you're asking for. And you may have a multimillionaire on your website and you've given them an option to give you $100. They think, okay, well, and it's a click the button, and then it's all a transaction with your credit card. They're ready to give you more, but you didn't give them that option. So don't underestimate yourself. Think more, think highly of yourself. And also kind of the other side of the same coin, if you'll pardon that metaphor, Dr. Carroll, is that idea of tin cupping it. Kind of on bending knee, would you mind giving us? And remember, it's the donor who's gaining out of this. And so going there with a bold understanding that you're really helping the donor practice their Christian faith, okay, continue a family tradition, do their duty when it comes to community service by giving it away. What they're looking for, and this is a critical element, and we can get into more depth, but probably not necessary today, is a credible Christian nonprofit to give it to. So all you need to do is just present who you are. This is what we do. This is what we're about. This is what we're trying to achieve. Have you learned anything about our mission that aligns with your own belief system? Great. Thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Donor. Would you be interested in becoming an investor in our mission, since it sounds like we'll help you practice your family values? So your Christian beliefs. And one other thing I want to mention here, and I'm in an area, depending on, of course, folks and where they're from and listening, but there's so many folks that, and we found this a lot when I grew up in Orlando and started doing my fundraising consulting work in Orlando. 2/3 to 3/4 of the population of Florida are from someplace else.
Yes.
And so what happens is they're still writing their check philanthropically. They're living in Orlando, but writing their check to United Way of Cincinnati, okay? Or the Community Food Bank of Philadelphia, because that's where they're from. And so one of the things that charities can do, nonprofits can do, Christian ministries can do, is help build new connections for folks moving to your area who not have their connection. It's 1,000 miles away and it's still going on. They're sending their check away or doing it online. So there's a lot that you can do as a Christian ministry to connect with people, seniors and people that are isolated as well. bringing them into the fold, asking them to come and listen and learn, come visit us. Come,
Yep.
you know, the
Yep.
favorite one is, the community kitchen will come down and help us serve or meet with our clients or follow up with our staff or even attend a board meeting. So there's a whole lot in it for the donor is all I'm trying to say. And it's a mindset that once you get it as a Christian ministry, you begin to understand, oh my goodness, it's a whole different way to view generosity, if you will, in this spirituality of fundraising, a book that I like to reference. So does that help? Does that answer the question?
That's great, John. And the book that you just showed, if you are watching Spirituality of Fundraising, we will link to that under this video. And if you're listening, it's in the show notes. So thanks for mentioning that, John.
Certainly.
You are alluding to something that you helped and a couple others in your organization helped me understand for us at Dr. Carroll Ministries. And that is the importance and the value of not making a request for giving as a transaction, but as developing a personal relationship, a connection with the people that are coming into your fold. And I kind of heard that before, but you all helped me personally understand that. And the board, I pass that on to our board. And it has made a difference. And let me just give you an opportunity to talk about that just a little bit more, especially the benefit to donors that, for Dr. Carroll Ministries or another organization that values that like us, developing that connection because you are making a difference in the mission. And it's not just dollars, it's you.
Gotcha. Two things that come to mind. Thanks for opening the door to that opportunity. Number one is trying to help board members understand that we need you to be a friend raiser more than a fundraiser. Mm-hmm. So that whole idea of, and there's an analogy that we use at Mission Accelerate, Mission Increase in the transformational giving model, is having a potential donor meet and fall in love with your mission as much as you already love it. And all you need to do as a friend raiser is to share how you have fallen in love, so much so that you've joined the board and you give regularly. We're working with a small environmental learning organization down in Florida 4 or 5 years ago. And a lot of retired businessmen and women. And they were busy, distracted, lots of other things going on in their lives. So they'd show up to a board meeting, they'd leave. Well, what we started to do in trying to create that, and it's really a culture of generosity, is to help them understand that they already have the experience that we're wanting them to try to go out and replicate with new donor prospects. So we simply ask them to please tell the story, because it's always about storytelling, Dr. Carroll. Please tell the story of when you first came to know this organization and fell in love with it so much so that you decided to not only participate in time, treasure, and talent, but join the board. And each one of them, when given the chance to tell the story, perked up. They got all excited. In many cases, these were grandparents who first brought their grandchild, because they had adult children back north, but the grandkids came down to this environmental learning center. And the 4-year-old who was still talking about picking up the starfish in the water pool or whatever. And got all, every single board member, they got brighter, they got perked up. And then when it was all done, we said, that's all we're asking you to do with potential donors, if you will. They'll decide whether they too want to fall in love with, but you need to spark that interest and back to the transactional piece and move beyond getting a gift this year. And now that's all you can get. You have to wait until next year's gala or next year's golf tournament, if you will, or frankly, next year's Giving Tuesday, but instead looking at developing that person into a lifelong donor. So as they come to the center upon invitation as a friend raiser, let me have you listen and learn. I've got free tickets for your grandchildren. Come on by. We got a special lecture. We're going to have some wildlife that's roaming around the community. I remember the one, my wife and I were just talking about this the other day, that is riveted in my mind. And it was probably 15 years ago in Asheville, a children's wing of the local hospital, and some of you may recall this when you hear it, is the book, remember Marley and Me?
Yes.
The book, Well, they had the author there. And the local animal shelter had shelter animals walking around the grounds of this resort at Asheville where the event was held. And it was just so great to see people interacting with dogs. It's like, oh, yeah, that's what it's all about. Because, half of America owns a dog. So that whole connection is all I'm getting at. And that's what friend raising is about. It's not asking somebody for money, begging them. As a donor said to me recently, frankly, who lives in Texas, that they treat me like an ATM. They just want to stick in their card, put in their PIN, and have my money pop out. But to really build a long-term relationship, and to finish the analogy in my answer to your question, and you'll know that you've been successfully dating and going steady and getting the donor to fall in love when they call you one day and say they've written you into their will. Okay. And now they are getting married to you. Because that's a significant commitment.
Yes.
And high net worth individuals might even say, you'll be hearing from my estate planning attorney, but you've courted them over time. You've introduced them to your mission. They've identified how it represents their Christian beliefs and values, so much so that they prayed over it. They've thought about it. They've talked to their spouse about it, and they've decided to actually put money in the will. You may not get the money for 10 years, but it's a statement of affirmation as an executive director or a minister of a ministry somewhere that this person has become a lifelong investor and not just a transactional giver. Does that make sense? Okay?
I love that, John. Absolutely.
Yep.
And you are so passionate and good about this. I just want to say to all the nonprofit or church leaders, and we know we have a number of them who are part of our podcast family here. Check out Mission Increase and Mission Accelerate, and those links are going to be available. If that just whole perspective and the transformational giving model that you've heard John talk about, if that's something that tweaks your heart for your organization, check the links, and we have that for you.
Thank you. Add one other thing too to what I just said, because I do want to reinforce something about the transactional nature. If you have transactional, if you will, activities when it comes to fundraising in an organization that work for you, don't abandon. If you have a golf tournament that brings in $250,000 a year, for gosh sakes, keep having that golf tournament. If you have an annual gala, we've got a client in Texas last year, their gala crossed the $450,000 mark. Keep having that. That's transactional, but they had a room full of generous people that fell in love with them. Don't stop doing those things. Certainly Giving Tuesdays are transactional in nature, and your online link, but keep in mind, as I said, change your online link and start with $50,000 and then end up with other, not $100 and go with it. So don't throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. What we find, Dr. Carol, in most cases, is lots of nonprofits are already doing transactional. They've never thought about pursuing major donors and helping a major donor advance their personal values, if you will, practice their faith or family tradition. So just add on that element of generosity for a major donor to come in and maybe write a bigger check than you ever imagined.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to shift slightly, if I can, John, to many of our audience have been part of the Dr. Carol Ministries family for a while. Some of you have been listening since we started this podcast like 6 years ago. Some of you have found out about it because you've been reading in our website or articles, or you've gotten one of our courses, or maybe you've come to one of our intensives or whatever, and you have personally experienced some of what God has given us to share. And for this Giving Tuesday, what we are inviting you to further your relationship with this ministry at is helping us with an opportunity God has brought to us that we want your partnership with. John, I spoke to you about this a couple months ago. The intensives that we have been doing this year, and those of you who are listening to every podcast, you've heard me mention that a couple times, but the amazing impact for the individuals who need this kind of help in the open places in their soul that God needs to heal. John, you have in your past life, and I know part of your heart is still there, seen some of the just rawness in broken relationships, marriages, families, or single people who have been broken in relationships. You've seen the heartache there. And as you and I talked about the opportunity God is bringing to this ministry, I just saw your heart awaken that, oh, wow, this is a big deal. Would you just talk about how you saw that
Sure.
opportunity and connection?
You just connected something for me too. It's like the old switchboard operators where the cords out, plugged them in. Because
Yep.
back to that issue a moment ago in setting up the discussion about Giving Tuesday, when I asked everybody listening to reflect on a time when they gave something away freely and remember how that felt. As a therapist, yes, I started in the 1970s working with troubled youth. And then we
Yes.
quickly figured out we're not going to have a whole lot of luck turning their lives around if we didn't get the whole family in the
Yep.
door. So we all became marriage and family counselors, if you will. But that to this day, and it's been many, many years, I stopped in 1986 working with marriages and families and transitioned into organizational development, nonprofit Christian ministry, fundraising, which I've been doing ever since. But out of the clear blue, and I just had one happen the other day, a gentleman, Kevin is his name, and he contacted me, and it's like, oh my goodness, yes. He said, you may not recall me, but back in X day, I came in with, and you did. And so for me, selfishly, as a therapist, now it was my profession, I was being paid in this job, but how grateful to give away of because so many folks have pain that they carry around that they keep secret. And so part of the learning in my training and education as a therapist was to make a safe place for folks to explore things that are so dark and deep and painful for them to bring out. So it really was very gratifying for me to do that kind of work. And over time, it's, no, gosh, probably 1 out of every 10 ministries we work with end up being in overall, usually health and human services, but in particular, if you will, and there's one that actually we were dealing with in Texas that was dealing with human trafficking and trauma-informed care, which
Yes.
I didn't know it was called that long ago, but when I was dealing with clients and realizing the trauma they had been through and being sensitive to that, it really reminded me how significant the work is in dealing with people healing and how gratifying it is and how because the thing here to keep in mind we saw with families is that invariably in exploring the initial interview with the teenager and then bringing the families in, they have this whole history of brokenness. And so if
Yes.
you say, this is the generation where it's going to stop. Okay, we're going to get beyond the brokenness. We're going to heal and know the folks behind you generationally may not choose to deal with this. Grandma may not come in and talk about the pain she went through that she visited on your mother, who then,
Yes.
if you will, played it out in multiple failed marriages of which you're a victim of. It sounds
Yes.
dramatic, but you don't have to continue that on. And that we found
Yes.
very empowering for folks to say, I could write my own legacy going forward now, if you will, rather than being just and it's like hearing the stories on TV where the first child from a family to go to college.
Yep.
We work with a ministry that focuses on sending moms to college.
Yep.
And it's so powerful because when you get their mission and understand that so much of the role modeling in single parent families is usually done by mom. And so if mom can get enough resources to get a better job, to do well, to get a college education, guess what? The kids follow. And so that whole understanding in therapy is as you heal, you get better, you get stronger, you make better decisions, and it impacts everybody around you, both in the family, in your outer circle, if you will, in your neighborhood, and so on. So it was very gratifying doing that kind of work. And it's kind of an extension of that individual one-on-one in my office in working with nonprofits, especially those who deal with families, deal with individuals, deal with victims of human trafficking. So
Yes. Yes. That is awesome, John. Well, for our listeners, or if you're watching, as soon as John and I are done, don't go away because we are going to show you a testimony of one of the individuals who has been transformed at one of our intensives, and a little bit more about the project we are embarking on right now that God has opened to us. John, this has been just, uh, my heart is soaring as we've talked. Something I have learned is God never asks us to do anything without providing the resources to do it. And you have so bolstered that rock bottom belief in me. Time, talent, and treasure, people, all of it. And this Giving Tuesday, what a wonderful opportunity that even just the culture at large can remind us that partnering with God in generosity, it enlarges us.
Well, it's interesting there. I'm kind of being triggered again by memories of being a therapist, but also brought current in light of meeting you and knowing that's what you're currently doing. And I do remember a kind of wise therapist professor saying to me, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Wow.
And
Yes.
yeah, so much of what you're doing and so much of what I had done in the past and the organizations we work with now is helping people get beyond the suffering. Yeah, everybody's going to have some pain in their life, if you will, but it's optional that you continue to suffer due to that. You can truly heal and get beyond that. And one of the things that I have to say, especially for those who might be listening that are men versus women, is it's tougher for men. I understand. There's all those stereotypes. And I just want to say, get over it. Okay. I have a hard
Thank
time.
you. Thank
I have a
you.
hard time talking about my feelings. Okay, get over it. You didn't have a hard time growing up as a child. You learn to repress your feelings and hold
Yes.
them back, and that can be
Yes.
unlearned. And so we settle for these stereotypes many times. And if the father goes along, and I have to give something away, it was just a technique I learned years ago when the wife would call to schedule the marriage appointment. And I said, well, I need to bring your husband in. Yeah, we'll see you next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And 10 a.m. walked out. There she was. He wasn't there because something always came up, some reason. And I always loved, this is the hint from the professor who said, and at the end of the session, I would say to the wife, tell your husband, by the way, that I really enjoyed getting to know him through your explanation of what he's like. And
Hey, I'm going to
invariably,
borrow
nine,
that.
nine
I'm
times
going to
out of
borrow
10,
that.
he would show up next time to make sure I had his side of the story, whatever it takes, as far as I'm concerned. So it's really it's just taking that whole idea of psychotherapeutic concepts. Much time we oftentimes see played out on television and movies, and and there's some good movies out there that represent. I always loved Good Will Hunting with Robin Williams and how he transformed that young man's life, if you will. So men and women both have trauma and pain and suffering and need to heal. And it's a bold, courageous thing to do for a man or a woman to do it. I just want to hope that anybody listening or anybody that listening that knows somebody that needs some help, don't give up on men that are repressed or holding their feelings back, because that's learned and it can be unlearned.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Folks, that's bonus. You didn't come to this podcast for that piece of wisdom. That's worth the whole thing. John, how delightful, and many, many blessings to you and the body of Christ at large that you serve so well.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Thanks for the great questions and the memories that you've stimulated inside of me. I got something out of today's broadcast as well.
Awesome. I hope your heart was enlarged as mine was. God has been generous with us, and there is just about nothing that can make you and I feel better and enlarge our hearts more than being generous. I alluded a couple times during that conversation that Dr. Carroll Ministries is in the middle of something very significant. God has brought an amazing opportunity to us. If you have been closely involved with this ministry for a while, you will know that about 9 months ago, earlier this year, we started doing in-person intensives, retreats, for those individuals who had been through stuff, focusing on the broken places in their story, and in an in-person environment, help them unpack those deep places in their story, sometimes say things that they had never said before, in the safety of a small group, to feel the love and healing and connection, and then to experience Jesus coming into their story. Nothing stays the same when Jesus shows up. And in these in-person events that we have done, when Jesus shows up, people's stories change. I want to take a moment right now and have you watch just about a minute of the story of one lady who came to one of our events. Watch this.
The weekend intensive encouraged me to allow Jesus to enter the darkest parts of my story. Jesus is the light of the world. In 1 John 1:5, it says, "In God there is no darkness at all." The light of Scripture was presented in nurturing 21st century experiences. It allowed me to trade out my worn and tired grave clothes for the hope, love, and light of Jesus. It rocked.
That just warms my heart. And Christie's is only one of many stories of the individuals whose lives have been changed. Well, we want to offer this to more people. You can be part of bringing this kind of transformation to more. Maybe you want to come to one of these events. To do that, we need our own space. God has brought a property into our world that we are purchasing. It needs to be outfitted and set up, and that's where you come in. I am inviting you to partner with God and with us in making this property available so lives can be changed. You are seeing right now a video of the inside of the main building on this property. An absolutely beautiful setting. Imagine being in this place for a several-day intensive retreat experience and allowing Jesus to change your story while in the middle of this beauty and safety. I am inviting you to help change someone's life so that they can experience that kind of healing. Arise, a place for transformation, is our capital campaign to make this property a reality for Dr. Carol Ministries. You will see the link under this video, drcarolministries.com/arise. We need your help. Imagine what it would feel like for you to know that your generosity is helping someone deal with their story of trauma or abuse or porn addiction or divorce or broken marriage or sex trafficking. Those are the kinds of issues and more that people come to these intensives with. You can change their life. Won't you go to our Arise page now and make your most generous gift? John said, I didn't tell him what to say, $50,000. You can do that. Or $5,000, $500, whatever God lays on your heart. Come join us, and you will partner with this ministry and with God in changing people's lives. If you have questions, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave me a confidential message on the contact page on our website. And if you have questions about this campaign, I'll respond to you personally. So reach out, ask your questions. I would love to hear from you. Make a generous donation on this Giving Tuesday, and may God bless you.